just loving video games and video game music. I grew up, I think, in the heart of the 8-bit era. So my first video game was Super Mario Brothers, and the first game that really blew my mind musically was Mega Man 2 and Mega Man 3. Like, these tunes are still on auto recall in my brain, and which was funny because I also grew up listening to film music and listening to Danny Elfman and John Williams and Alan Silvestri and scores like Back to the Future, Beetlejuice, Empire Strikes Back. These are the kind of scores that really blew my mind and like made me want to do music. And when I was growing up, I really didn't see a distinction between video game music and film music. I thought it was all great melodies. I could have Mega Man 2 stuck in my head just as easily as The Empire Strikes Back. And as I grew up, I felt like the technology in video games allowed the music to kind of grow up with me. And I felt like I never really appreciated it until much later, as looking back, that as I was getting a little bit older, the technology changed so you could have more. First, you could have more synth voices inside a game. Then eventually you got into some basic audio recording, which opened the door up to orchestral scores. And then by the time I got into the business myself, game scores were every bit as ambitious and melodic and powerful and emotional as film scores. And so the world of writing music, I thought, for someone who was classically trained and had orchestral training, suddenly you could do games just as easily as you could do film or TV, and you used all the same tools, And so I got into the business primarily starting in television scoring, which is funny because of all the things I grew up listening to, television was not like the top of my list. I loved A-Team and shit, but like I wasn't, I wasn't like, yes, I want to be the guy, A-Team guy. But around the same time, television also was really a renaissance, and I got a show called Battlestar Galactica. Yeah. So say we are. So that was my first show. Actually, that was my first job. I was right out of school. I was 23 years old when I started the show, and that really opened a lot of doors for me and allowed me to explore some new things, and a lot of people kind of recognized what I was doing on that show, and that branched me off into film and video games and a lot of other things, but I owe a lot to Battlestar. But I was always remembering Mega Man 2. I was always thinking about Mega Man 2 and how much I wanted to do a game. And so shortly after I got Battlestar, I got my chance to score my first video game, which was a game for Capcom, which was awesome, called Dark Void. And the game, So it was a good score. It really was. It was like one of the greatest scores I'd ever written. The game had the misfortune of coming out right when Mass Effect 2 came out. It was like the same month. And I remember even I ran home from the store and I had Dark Void and I had Mass Effect 2 and I was like, sweet! I think I actually played Mass Effect 2 first, so it's I didn't blame anybody for playing Mass Effect 2 instead of Dark Void. But what was really cool about it is I've been getting to work with Capcom and interfacing a little bit with Inafune-san, who was involved, was this notion of making interactive music, And for me, I kept thinking about Mega Man 2 and how melodies everyone can recall the music in certain levels, and decades later that still stuck with me, and I was I was so terrified but also excited at the prospect of scoring a game, because I was this is a chance to play around in that world and create music that is part of an interactive experience. It was a lot of fun. I mean, it really was. I had the time of my life on the score, and I just wrote my ass off on it. It was a lot of fun. And since then, I've done a number of other interactive titles and games, and I'm working on one right now. And it's just been a part of my life since really as far as I can remember, you know. So it's really exciting now that I think that game music in particular has kind of branched off and is being recognized, I think, as an art form, which is really exciting for me because I feel like I get to be kind of at the forefront of it. Anyway, that's a quick intro. I'd rather open it up to questions and see what you guys want to know. Yeah.
I'm going to ask what I'm sure a bunch of people are going to ask. I've been wanting to get into game and film music forever. It's been 5-6 years, not a lot. Anything I've written for has gotten canceled, which is a bummer. But it's just where to start, where you went, and also the music you wrote for when they lose Herschel's farm was the best.
Oh, thank you.
For when I just love that you bumped it up from a chamber to a full.
Yeah, no, that was.
That took me by surprise. I was like, oh.
Good ears, thank you. Yeah, that was it was an episode of The Walking Dead that it just needed to be bigger. Yeah.
I noticed it was gonna be. I was like, what's he doing?
Oh, sweet. Cool. Well, okay. How do you get into the business? That is a great question, and everybody has their own journey. So, first of all, there is no right thing to do. You know, you just need to keep that in mind. But specifically, I think that when you kind of look at the people that get into the business and the people that succeed, the one thing I would say they all have in common is that they are writing music so much that there comes a point when you, as a byproduct of writing music all the time, you realize that, oh, wait a minute, I'm being paid now to do this. Like, that's what happened with me. Like, it was just, that's all I ever did, and if you're passionate about it, like, you tell me that you've done projects that are canceled, right? Okay, first of all, that does almost as much for your career as doing something that is a huge hit.
Oh, I haven't minded it at all, because it gives me a big portfolio.
It gives you a portfolio. Also, people that you work with that are in the trenches with you on a project that's canceled almost appreciate your attitude and involvement more than if it just went great. You know, you can form relationships. It's all about relationships. People that want to work with you, people that when they work with you on something small, and when they get into something bigger. What's your name?
Connor.
All right, so Connor. So somebody worked with you on something that got canceled, but they remember liking you. They're like, dude, he was awesome. He had green hair, and I loved his music. But you know, then they're like, yeah, I want to bring Connor onto this other thing, you know. So I think that some quick, simple tips to barf at you would be always have a great attitude, always be the person on any project that everyone loves collaborating with. So it doesn't matter if the game is good or if it even gets canceled. It's like everyone loves working with you and your ideas are cool, but you're friendly and you're collaborative. It's like you want to be the person that somebody is so excited about getting to the music in their game just because they want to hang out with you again. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's when you are truly that type of collaborative artist. I think, you know, getting into the business is just a byproduct of that. You know, the person who's like that will get into the business. You know what I mean? It's just a matter of time and finding the right projects, you know. The other piece of advice I would give is just do as much as you can and then do a little bit more. But I mean, if you're always kind of doing things, whether it's even for yourself, making a demo, putting something online, scoring a project, or like, you know, just sort of constantly keep reinventing yourself and pushing yourself. Don't sit around waiting for the project to come along. You know what I mean? Like, get out in front of it. Do the music first, and then those projects will catch up. What else? Yes?
So you brought up Mega Man 2, which is wonderful. So there's, I think, a push and pull now with modern music engines where we can do so much.
Yeah.
Part of what made Mega Man 2 work was repetition, memorable melodies. So now we can bring in all of these layers and do all these things. So how do you approach still scoring in a memorable way, even though it's interactive and there's layers?
It's a fascinating question, and one of the things that I I realized when I was scoring my first couple of games is that the 8-bit era, what made it so successful was the lack of color. So you look at it as a composer, what tools do you have at your disposal? You have rhythm, you have melody, you have harmony, but really in almost a black and white setting. Like in the grand scheme of sounds, the difference between a triangle wave and a square wave and a sine wave, it's kind of subtle. It's not like the difference between a French horn and a cello section, But I think that forced people to think more melodically, and it forced a good game score, an effective game score, even doesn't even have to be good, an effective game score in the 8-bit era really needed to fire on all cylinders in rhythm, melody, and harmony, and that buried in our brains. And I do think in the 90s, I think a lot of composers got excited by color. Okay, suddenly you could have a cool synth patch, or an orchestral mood, you could have strings in there, or you could have, brass. That's really exciting, but I felt like the pendulum swung so far away from melody just because people were excited they didn't have to rely on it. I feel like the pendulum swings back a little bit. Melody and repetition are incredibly important to make something iconic and memorable and effective. The one thing it doesn't do, you have to be careful about, is creating tension. Because sometimes repetition, I feel like repetition in a game, if you're trying to make something scary or intense, the more you hear it, the less effective it becomes pretty damn fast. And so that's, for me, when I'm scoring a game, the first struggle I try to overcome is I talk with the developers and just say, like, my goal would be that this sounds like, if it's a 60-hour game, I want it to feel like 60 hours of music. I want it to feel like that feeling like when you first come to a new area and you hear this new piece of music and you go, oh shit. It's exciting, Or like a big boss walks into the screen and his theme comes up and you're just like, oh my God, and you're like shitting your pants, right? But then you die a couple of times and the fourth time around you're like, I know. All right. And that's kind of a drag. But it was always a fantasy for me. Like, could that be overcome? Could it be, is that something you can circumvent? And I think technology now, at this point, the technology allows anything that you as the composer and the developers on the tech side can come up with, So I find that, like, the ability to create music that can be altered and changed, the ability's there. So it's like I almost feel like I'm trying to create melodies that are memorable for the moments that it matters. And then I'm trying to create music that can be customized and tweaked and changed so that it can be adaptive for the moments when you want to create the tension. I think about it in cinematic terms. That's what makes film scoring so much easier than game scoring, because you have complete control from top to bottom over what the audience experiences. How many times they hear a theme, you can just say definitively, like, at this point in the movie, they've heard the theme 3 times, so we should do this. It'll be, and with a game, you can have some semblance of control, and obviously other things you can't control, so it's an interesting experience. Yes, a question there.
So, other than the obvious, what inspired you to compose Walking Dead opener to be like that dark? And then what inspired you to use like the strings?
Those are great questions, and they're related, actually. So when I got hired on The Walking Dead very early, before they had cast anyone. There was no footage to look at. I just knew the comics really well. And I was working with Frank Darabont, the creator. And for some reason, the strings to me were my entrance into the world. I wanted to kind of reference a classic Bernard Herrmann, Hitchcockian kind of classic horror sound, upon which I grafted elements that I thought were more distinct for The Walking Dead. So like I had distorted banjos and distorted slide guitars and like instruments that the show takes place in Georgia. So I wanted something that had kind of a bluegrass, kind of weird quality. And there's actually a lot of the sound in that main title that actually is just there's a pedal steel guitar and a slide guitar. But the main title itself, it's kind of funny you'd ask this, because the first thing I do on any project is I write the theme. And then I have that rolling around in my head, and I go from there. With The Walking Dead, I was struggling. I couldn't hear it. It just wasn't there. So I wrote a couple cues in the first episode. I think the first cue I wrote was when Rick walks out of the hospital for the first time, which I thought was like, that'll help me get into the mood. And so at the end of the pilot, episode, the end of the first episode, there's one action scene. I don't know if you guys haven't seen it. It's one of the coolest first episodes of TV I've ever seen. It's so stark and quiet and creepy and still and moody. The closest thing to an action scene is literally a 15-second sequence where a guy runs under a tank. If you guys have seen the show, do you remember this? Okay, so when he runs under the tank, I immediately is like, oh, I know what to do here, and I had the strings, and I was and I stopped. I went, holy shit, that's the main title. So I closed out the session, I opened the main title, and I was like, oh my god, don't forget it. And I wrote it super fast, and it was like, boom. And I sent it to Frank, and he was like, that's the main title. And they sent it to AMC, and they were like, that's the main title. So it happened really fast. And that was kind of cool. So it was like one of those happy accidents where and if you listen, it's still there. You can still hear it in that tank scene a little bit. But it was just sort of a happy accident, I guess. As one side note about the Walking Dead theme, any of you guys play any string instruments? Any string players, like violinists? Okay, all right. So like I'm not a string player, and I've gotten a lot better since then at writing for strings. But at the time, I was like, oh, I'm gonna have it be open strings, like on a violin. That is so you don't have to do anything with this hand. It's like G, D, A. So it's all open strings, and there's a B flat. And I was like, this is awesome. You go da 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 da. You could just do this for days, right? It'd be super easy. Okay, fine. Except that I did it with the right hand going so fast, go like every string player that's ever played this, after one take through, they're like, dude, no, I'm sorry. Hold on. And I was like, what? It should be easy. They're like, yeah, this hand is easy. This is impossible. And of course the first group that did it, the little string group, like we did 10 takes, and by the end they were like, dude, this is not cool, man. So it's sort of funny. I was like, oh, I was so obsessed with making it easy on the right hand, or the left hand, that I made it the hardest thing ever. Anyway, okay, any other questions? What else? Yes, in the back there.
How assertive do you get with the person who's commissioning you, who's exercising their veto power, and you strongly disagree with their decision?
That's a fascinating question. So, the person that you're probably talking about, I'm not going to name names. No, the person you're talking about is like the person whose project it is. So, I don't even think about it that they have veto power. I really think about it like I'm doing their score. It's theirs, So it's like their input is only there to help me get what they have. And I try to always remember that like they have a vision that I don't have. They have a bird's eye view of this whole thing, whether it's a film or a TV show or a game. And I have a very concrete vision, very specific vision of what the music is, but it's my job to kind of get what their vision is and make something that fits. So most of the time, what I do when somebody says, like, I don't like a specific idea, what I try to do is get what I call the note behind the note. What is the reason they're really saying this? Like if somebody goes, is that a clarinet? Is that a fucking clarinet? I don't want to hear a clarinet. It's like, okay, well let's talk about what you really want, I try not to talk about music, ever. When people are like, okay, so like I want the guitars to do this, I'm like, cool, man, let's step back. And I say, what do you want the audience to feel? And you talk to me about that, because you can talk in a really informed way. You're an expert on this. What do you want the audience to feel? What do you want the gamer to feel? What do you want the experience to be? Then let me go into my studio and let me do my thing, and I'll come back armed with the information about what you want. So with that said, most of the time I'm able to kind of meet in the middle on something. I mean, when you're talking about that, like if I'm talking with someone who doesn't understand the details of music, it doesn't help for me to be like, oh, but cool, man, check out the pizzicato and the consort. Oh, it's so sweet, right? Like, they don't understand. In the same way that, like, if the director was like, dude, don't you get the lens that I used? Isn't that awesome? I'd just be like, sure, I don't care. Every once in a while, though, somebody really does, like they say something and you disagree with it. You really think, look, the audience is going to like this. I just know it. Like, you may not even have the perspective anymore. You're so inside it. But when you're writing music for hire, you're not writing music for the audience. You're writing music for one person, sometimes 2 or 3, but that person with the veto power is your audience. And if they don't like it, it doesn't matter if it's the right idea, it will never be heard. It will never be heard. Even if you go, well, maybe I'll do it your way, but I'll try my way. Oh, don't waste your time. Like you make this person happy, and then you guys go out there and you make the audience happy, you know? But that's something that I try to remember, that it's like, this is you have an audience of one. And after that, you have to hope that, like, if the broader audience, if you can make something that makes this person happy and makes the audience happy, then, like, the stars have aligned and you're in a really good place. But one other thing on that, I know I'm rambling, but it's such an interesting question. Your job, I think, as a composer is to, like, help them, if they don't understand music, help them make the right decision. You know? So if they're against an idea that you know is a good idea, then the first stance you should take is you're presenting it wrong, or you're talking about it wrong. You know? There's a lot of things that I just do and I don't say that I'm going to do. You know, like I don't sit down in advance and say, hey, guy who just hired me on The Walking Dead, I'm going to use banjos. You know? And I like some of them, like to this day, I've never fessed up that, like, the first 3 seasons of Walking Dead, it's a distorted banjo that is the sound of the walkers. And sometimes, you know, an executive will be like, that cool, like, piano thing, I love that. And I'm just like, awesome. Dude. And I learned that the hard way. I really did. Like, the first movie I ever did, or the second movie, the movie was about inbred mutant cannibal hillbilly zombies. Okay? Like, if anything screamed for banjos, it's this movie. Right? I mean, I was just like, dude, we're going to use banjos. And the director was really stoked. And there was a producer on the film who was like, no, we're not using banjos. And I was like, but they're like mutant inbred hillbilly zombie cannibals. Like, this is awesome. And I was realizing I'm just like digging a hole the more I talk about banjos. And then I was like, okay, I won't use banjos. And then I did, and he loved it. But I realized, like, I'm just giving him something to have an adverse reaction to. And so why do that? Well, you know, just when you don't talk about music, if I just talked about the emotion, like, it's going to be, like, whatever this producer wants, like, whatever his fear is, like, the movie's not scary enough, you can pick that up pretty fast. And then all you do is talk about, well, we're going to make it scary. Like, it's going to be terrifying, and this scene's going to be horrifying. And it's like, okay, cool, man, cool. And he doesn't care if it's banjos or kazoos or whatever. He doesn't care. Like, his need is like, I want to make sure this is scary. And then you provide that. What else? Yes, red shirt back there.
You just mentioned how you got an adverse reaction to the flat out saying banjo. Have you had a similar adverse reaction to, for example, accordion? Because your 7-minute accordion piece from Thousand Like on YouTube is excellent.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Accordion. Yes, actually, I have. So I did a show called Eureka. Yeah, it was a fun show. Really fun show. And I think in the 4th season, they, like, kind of reinvented the show a little bit. It was like a soft reboot. There was this really cool time travel plot introduced in the premiere that kind of shook up a bunch of the relationships. It's a sci-fi show, like genre show. And up until that point, I'd been using a lot of accordion. And then the showrunners were kind of like, we're kind of done with this. Like, they didn't want to come out and say it, but they would like, hey, how about this cue? Why don't we use a little less accordion? And why don't we use a little less? And finally, I think it was like 4:02, 4:03, I was like, guys, am I done with the accordion? And they were like, yeah. So it went away. Yes.
So, Battlestar Galactica, I think I forgot, was after season 4, Kara Grace playing this really old cracked piano, which syncs perfectly with the background music, even though that piano does. Describe how you did that for me.
Yes. Okay, so at the end of season 4, there was an episode. I'm going to keep this spoiler free. If you haven't seen Battlestar, you should go see it. So where Kara, there's this old upright piano. Boy, it's really hard to keep this spoiler free. There's a piano. Okay, so anyway, that was an episode where I was involved really early. Like, the writers called me when they were writing that. And in fact, a lot of the dialogue for the guest character in that episode was based on me. When he's talking about music. And ironically, so there was even longer speeches where he was talking about writing and composing and the struggles of music. And the writer, David Weddle, called me up and he told me about this character. and he said, we want to talk about what it's like when you're really struggling. If you go back even earlier in that season, the mid-season finale, where they find you know where. There's a cue there, with this huge choral cue. It's like one of the best pieces of music I've ever written. And I struggled on that piece for days. I mean, I was like miserable writing that. And I was just writing that piece when this other writer calls me up and he goes, I want to talk to you about what it's like when you're really struggling with something. And I was like, dude, okay. So it was weird. It was like this weird feedback loop where my experience writing 410 informed the dialogue in 418. They flew me up to the set. I spent about a week there when they were filming that episode about the piano player. And I coached Katie on how to play her part. And there was this upright piano that production had found, based solely on its looks. It was actually a piano that they had gotten, and then they aged it. They like beat it up, and it was funny. It was like really, really sounded awful. But it sounded so awful, and we were all playing it on the set, like I'm on the Battlestar Galactica set, that I finally was like, I'm not going to be able to recreate this in LA. So I asked the sound recordist, I was like, do you think we can get in here after hours, and I want to sample this thing, like every note on it. I want to be able to take this piano digitally back home. And so we did. They shut the lights off and the heat off. This is in Vancouver. So we're like freezing. And for like 7 hours over a night, I'm playing every note like quietly, a little louder, and the guy's like freezing. But it's like, it's crazy because like, maybe it's just emotional for me, but like that was recorded on the set of Battlestar Galactica, And so we edited all the sounds and brought it into a digital instrument, and so I was able to I didn't want the director to have to worry about whether or not these actors could like really learn the part or what, any of that stuff. So I just said, get the shots you want, I'll fix it later. So actually all the performances in that, even the close-ups of the fingers, all the sound, the production sound was muted, and it was like note by note, finger by finger, I recreated what they're playing. And one of my tricks with this, which I've used in another show more recently, is like when you're really paying attention, it's like when the actors' hands are visible, it's nice and simple, and as soon as the camera moves away, it's like, it's like, oh, then it slows down for this one passage. No, it worked really well. It was really powerful, and I'll tell you, one of the most moving musical experiences of my life, which I will keep spoiler-free. So there's a scene, boy, this is going to be hard to do. So there's a character with an eye patch, okay? And he's sitting with other characters like him. And, okay, so, this is hard. So he hears someone playing something on the piano that he recognizes because he heard it in a different context in the previous season. Okay, so anyway, the moment when we're shooting that, all the you-know-whatses are sitting over there, and Kara starts playing, and he stands up, and he hears this music. I'm getting chills thinking about this. It's so good. And he walks over. So, because I was on set and the camera wasn't on the piano, that was me playing. So I'm playing, on the piano, and suddenly he rises, and he's like, oh my God. He's got this look on his face, and he's like walking toward me, and then them set up, and I'm just sitting here playing like, this is the most awesome thing ever. That's why I'm just like pulling them forward. And it was like they walked away from the piano, I was like almost weeping. I was like, this is so rad, oh my God. So whenever I see that shot, I'm just like, he's coming to me. It's pretty cool. Anyway, yes.
Hi, so I wanted to take you back a little bit and see if you remember something. So back in the early days of dial-up internet and small hard drives, we didn't have MP3s, we couldn't download them, we couldn't, store them on our systems. We had MIDI files.
Yes.
So, I would go on the internet and look for MIDIs of my favorite bands.
I know where this is going.
Boingo Boingo.
Yes.
so I remember when I saw you in Battlestar Galactica, I'm like, holy crap, I remember that name.
That's the Oingo Boingo MIDI file guy.
Yeah. My favorite MIDI was Reptiles and Samurai, and I recognized your name, and I'm like, holy crap, this is so awesome.
No one's ever asked me about that. You're the first. And you're awesome. Yeah, so like real quick, so like I was a huge Boingo fan growing up, huge. And actually all those guys started playing for me on Battlestar Galactica. So I got to work with them a lot. But
That's gotta be awesome.
it was awesome. They played on Dark Void. They played on all my stuff. The guitar player, the drummer, the bass player, a lot of those guys. And actually, I've worked with them on a lot of things, which is really cool. But yeah, so my brother sings for them now. So, but I was sequencing stuff that I really liked, and I like the first thing I did when I was like, "There's an internet." Oingo Boingo, because I grew up in a town where like I was the only person who'd heard of Oingo Boingo. So anyway, there was places where you could share MIDI files, and mine were like painstakingly recreated. Like I would recreate the live versions and put in every drum fill and every little bend in the guitars. It was fun, but it was also just like it was passion for me, and it was me and one other guy that would do all these. But anyway, I don't know if he's scoring film and TV now. I don't know who he was. Anyway, that's awesome, dude. That's crazy. Yes.
Not necessarily your worst, but what's your least favorite work that you've worked on?
Wow, I can pick my worst. I'm just curious, like by what parameter? Like what you?
Like a show or a film or something that was like you were just, I can't wait to get it over. It was the worst one, worst experience.
It's an interesting question. And to be honest with you, and I'm not just bullshitting you, it's going to sound like bullshit, but it's not. I am very fortunate in that my first job was Battlestar Galactica, and I knew what it was. I mean, I was such a fan of the material and what they were doing with it, that it kind of allowed me to be a little choosier. And it also, like, shows came to me that are shows that I loved. Like, because of Battlestar, like, the guy producing Terminator: The Sarah Connor Chronicles is like, hey, I'm doing a show and I want it to feel like a genuine extension of T2 and, like, nothing else after T2. And I was like, sweet, dude, I'm your guy. So I haven't really taken on something that I felt obligated to take on, and usually the exhaustion that kicks in, if I ever feel like, man, I can't wait for this to be over, it's only just like a physical exhaustion that kicks in after a while. So there really hasn't been anything like that. I mean, if anything, it's sort of like I think the only kind of disappointment you can really have in this industry is like if you go into a project hoping to do a certain thing or expecting to do a certain thing, and then you can't do it. It's like that can be frustrating. But again, it's like I always try to remember that I'm doing this for someone else. So it's sort of like if you're disappointed, like, oh, I wanted to do a score in this style and now they want it in this style. It's like, well, that's not their fault. It's you just got to kind of adjust your expectations and stay open-minded. Cool question though. Yes.
I know you just finished up with Tentacles of the Wing. So
Yes.
I was wondering what sort of sounds we can expect to hear.
Yeah. Okay. So I just finished up a movie called 10 Cloverfield Lane for J.J. Abrams, and there are a number of things that you can keep your ear out. The thing I'm most excited about in that score is there's an instrument called the blaster beam. Somebody back there knows what a blaster beam is. Star Trek TMP, baby. So in Star Trek: The Motion Picture, if you recall that score for the V'ger theme, a lot of the exterior space shots, there's this sound, this huge cavernous, this huge thing. Like, what the fuck is that? It's a blaster beam. That's what the fuck it is. And it was invented by this guy, Craig Huxley. And it's essentially a 15-foot long pedal steel guitar. It's crazy, okay? Like, it's crazy. And my whole life, I've always thought that is awesome. Star Trek TMP is one of my favorite scores. And I was always like, dude, one day I want to write something for the blaster beam. And so when I got 10 Cloverfield Lane, I was trying to think about what would be really cool for a piece like this, and also something that I wanted. It's subterranean. I mean, even the poster, it's like the house is up here and the logo's down in the ground. So I was like wanting deep, resonant tones. And then I was like, oh my God, the blaster beam. And so I spent a couple of days like trying to track this guy down, because I was like, I haven't heard of anyone using this in a long time. And it turns out he's the nicest guy in the world. So cool. And I went over to his studio and I was like, when was the last time? So he played blaster beam for like Jerry Goldsmith. James Horner used it a little in Wrath of Khan. He used it for John Barry. Like, he worked with everybody. And I was like, when was the last time you used this in a score? And he was like, 35 years ago. So I was like, awesome. So that's something. There's a few other fun surprises in that. But that to me is a really fun opportunity to be able to do an homage to a score that I adore, but also like take a really weird instrument and write for it in a different way. I mean, I spent a couple of days with Craig and just said, I want to learn what this thing can do. Like, I know what the V'ger theme sounds like, and I can't just do that, or else it transitions from being an homage to something else. But I was like, what can it do? And we figured out a lot of unique things, and it was really inspiring, super inspiring. It's a cool movie too. Yes?
What does it do with weird instruments? Very,
Yeah.
Is that your result that you find all the odd orphan instruments?
Yes, it might actually be. I find new sounds incredibly inspiring. And I also find that I need a gateway into a project. I need a thing that I know is going to be there that gets ideas going. And sometimes it doesn't even end up being the primary sound of the score, but it really does help me get going. And I also find that having a unique sound, in a weird way, it's like a shortcut, man. You come up with the right sound, and suddenly the sound itself is a huge component of the score. If you look at my score to Black Sails, show on Stars, and it's like pirate heavy metal hurdy-gurdy music. It's pretty rad, I'm not gonna lie. No, but it's like the sound itself is so weird, and even now when I hear it, it's still, whenever that main title comes up, even I go, damn, that is the weirdest sounding thing ever. It's just but I mean, what's also cool is it's not just randomly weird. Hurdy-gurdies existed in 1715. So it's I was starting with, I want it to be historically accurate. And then from there kind of evolved into something else. But it really got my creative juices going. And it producers are excited by it. Anything that gets them excited. I mean, going back to the idea, the question somebody else had about what do you do when they don't like something? Well, if they don't like something, you've already fucked up your job. You should preface them, get them excited in advance. Before my showrunner even heard the hurdy-gurdy, I was like, dude, I found a hurdy-gurdy. What's that? And it's you just get them, you tell them a little in advance, you sell them on it, and it's just suddenly I want to hear that. And it automatically makes them more curious and makes them feel like they've got something special, and it's they're gonna like it more than if you just kind of say nothing and expect them to kind of identify it. So, I don't know, yeah. I definitely am not the kind of person that just writes for a traditional orchestra every single time, only because, I don't know, I'm just not that kind of person.
The golf will be a Birnbaum from Brazil.
Oh,
Get one of those.
the Birnbaum? Black Sails, episode 306 in a week. 2 weeks, yeah, I think it's coming up in a week or two. Sorry, man. Yes?
Okay, I have another spoilery question.
Keep it vague, I'll know what you mean.
I will. So in the season 3 finale,
Yes.
the song.
Yes.
So did the writers specifically come to you and say, we want this song specifically, but not the familiar version everybody knows, we want it different? Or did they kind of just say, okay, you can pick whatever song you want for that,
Yeah.
as long as it's going to surprise the viewers?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. You're basically asking, what the fuck? Yes. What the frack?
Were there any other moments where the writers kind of came to you and said, oh, we really want you to do this, like how the anthem for the 12 colonies
Sure.
was like the old that of
Yeah. Well, the biggest example are the end of season 3 and the piano thing in season 4. Actually, that's not true. The last episode with the numbers. Okay, anyway, let me answer your question. There's so many good things to talk about with that show. Okay, that song, I'm just going to say what it is because it's the song itself. All right, so the song All Along the Watchtower by Bob Dylan, that I had nothing to do with the selection of that song. In fact, Ron Moore, the showrunner, wanted to use that song in 2 other occasions and was shot down. It was supposed to be in the ending of season 1. When Baltar and Six are walking into the opera house, it was supposed to be playing there. Thank you, yes. I was actually, when I found that, I was like, yeah, that was a good moment for me. I like that. But it was just an idea, and Ron was just like, I don't know, man. It's just, I don't know. It's just like, should be that. So I was just sort of, I heard a rumor. It was like, I hadn't read the scripts. And I think an assistant editor called me, and they're like, hey, man, so what are you going to do about this All Along the Watchtower thing? And I was like, excuse me, what? And I found out, like, oh, yeah, we need a version of All Along the Watchtower. And I'm like, I can't even fathom why this show would need it, what it would possibly be. And finally, I think I was in the offices, and I caught Ron Moore in the hallway. I was just like, oh, Ron, oh my God, dude, what's going on with All Along the Watchtower? And he's like, oh, just do it. And I was like, what? Should it sound like the Jimi Hendrix one? And he's like, just make it sound like Battlestar. I'm like, okay. And he like walked. It was like he was saying like, just write me a little like C major chord. Like I'm gonna go. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. That was it. That was all the direction I got. So I went home and I thought, okay. And here's the other crazy thing. I had zero idea what the usage, what the context, what the purpose was. I literally was told, write a version of All Along the Watchtower, make it sound like Battlestar Galactica, period. Okay? So when I actually saw the episode later and my temp version was in there, I was like, no way! But anyway, so I did a version. I was like, this is such a weird opportunity. I'm just going to do the version that I'll be able to tell people was the version, like, I'm just going to go for the weirdest thing I could possibly think of. And I was like, take George Harrison, Rage Against the Machine, traditional Indian music, and like... And I brought my brother in. My brother's a really great rock singer, and he sang a demo of it. And the Oingo Boingo guys, John Avila's on bass, Steve Bartek on guitar, Steve Bartek on electric sitar. And we did this demo, and I sent it in, and I was like, all right, well, I can't wait for the notes on this shit. You know? And Ron just wrote back, he's like, that's good, I think that'll work. And that was it. I mean, really, the demo and the final version are virtually indistinguishable. It was just, again, one of those really rare situations where all the way up to the top, up to the head of Sci-Fi Channel was like, yeah, okay. And then it turned out to be one of the most iconic things I would ever do on that show. It was really an incredible opportunity. Yes?
So, when you're writing a score, do you only have the option to write through the final cut, or do you have the option to say, oh, hold on the shot for 2 more seconds, and it's a great idea?
Interesting question. Yeah, you know, it's tough. You have, it depends on your relationship and it depends on the schedule. The short answer, the how do I get into the business answer is you score the picture that you're given, right? You know, it's like you find a way to make it work because everybody's under a lot of pressure and they've got a lot bigger things to worry about than music. That's the short answer. The slightly longer answer is if you have the right relationship, you can, I think, you should be a respected part of the filmmaking process or the game-making process. And if you approach it the right way, you can say things like you just said. You can say, hey, can this shot be 2 seconds longer? Or can we, you know, because you are trying to make their project better. And if they respect you as a filmmaker, and you're not just like, I want my music to be better. You know, if they sense that you're really on their side, then you can say things like that if the schedule allows it. And there certainly have been some notable times when I've done that. You know, it just depends on the nature of the collaboration, you know, On 10 Cloverfield Lane, I had a lot of involvement in that kind of thing. I mean, I was involved early, and the music and the images, were sort of malleable enough that I worked closely with the director and with JJ, who's really open to these kind of things. And I think you'll hear the music in that is woven into it in such a way that that's the only way that could have happened. Like my most fun example was a show I did the first season of a show called Human Target, and it was sort of like an Indiana Jones adventure show, right? And there was this episode where, as a tribute to Indiana Jones, he gets in a plane. There's a daring escape, and the plane flies away. This is a show on Fox, okay? So it's like they want to cut the fat, keep it moving, keep it exciting, and so there's a shot of the plane, and the guy gets in, and it's like plane takes off, fade to commercial. And I was looking at the showrunner, and I go, hey man, if we're really gonna do Indiana Jones here, we want a fanfare, right? We want to make this a little longer. And he was like, well, how much? What do you think? Talking 10 or 12 frames? What are we thinking? And I was like, 20 seconds? And he's like, you want me to go to the network and say, I want a 20-second shot of the plane doing nothing? And I was like, yes. And so he did, and he did. And what's funny is they sent it into the network, the final cut. And it's like, we were in such a hurry, they didn't really temp it, so it's like the old music stopped. So there was a 10 minutes, so it's like, dun, 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 dun. Fades to black. And I was like, wow, dude. And then we were both fired the next season. So maybe that's why. But anyway, no, it was funny. It worked out really great. And then I did a huge fanfare, and it sounded awesome, and he was really happy. But I had that relationship with him. Yes?
I have a question. Do you have any experience where you're up against the wall with that, you have to pull an all-nighter, or you have to change something at the last minute, or maybe the most stressful? I'm also curious about your process as far as you compose on the piano primarily. What was it with melodic on the piano?
I do compose at the piano. I have a template. I work in Digital Performer. I have a template that is just insanely large. I mean, it's just 1,500 tracks of everything I could ever want. Because once I get into creative mode, I don't want to spend even 2 seconds going, let me pull up that patch. The idea's gone, So I work very swiftly that way. As for stress and working under deadlines, I do work well under pressure. I'm not going to say that it's not a factor. But I try to make sure that the more, there's sort of a ratio, right, of the more creative stuff happens earlier in the process. By the time you get to the schedule crunch, the real deadline, you should have your themes figured out, your themes approved. People have heard stuff, and they're like, yeah, and so it's like I will spend, this is an extreme example, okay, but I did a show, a superhero show called The Cape, okay, and it was a fully orchestral score. It's huge. It was my tribute to Shirley Walker and Batman the Animated Series. That's why I did the show. And I had 14 days to do a 2-hour pilot, which was about 75 minutes of music in 14 days. So I was mapping it out. How many minutes a day do I have to write? It's that ain't nothing, But I needed a theme. I knew I needed to have my superhero theme. I spent the first day, I was just tinkering around, and I didn't have it. I spent the second day, I didn't have it. I spent the third day. I spent the fourth day. I spent the fifth day with nothing. Knowing that it's okay. I can do this. It has to, if I have a good theme, then it can work. And then I was finally bum, 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 bum. I was like, yes! That has all the little things that I need. I sent it to the producers, and I was like, hope you like this. And they did. And then I wrote the rest. I wrote 75 minutes of music in 8 days. But it was it actually was kind of fun, and it was stressful, but it wasn't panic stress, because I had the material,
So you need that push to get the momentum.
Yeah, and it's sort of it's just a way of managing your stress, knowing that there's stress because I don't know what the score is, and then there's stress because I just have to generate a lot of minutes based on material that I know I invested a lot of time in. you know? So then it's like when I get to the action cue in Act 3, or it's like if you're in a game, it's like, okay, this is like, you know, the 4th level in, but it's like, I know the material. I can kind of trust the material. I don't need to like kill myself coming up with this. I'm going to fall back on the material that I've like really developed. Like another example, one of the cool things about games, I'm working on a game right now where they hired me so early in the process, I spent 3 months on the main title. I don't mean like I wrote it and then waited months for feedback. I mean, we just kept bouncing it back. And it's like, I don't think it's there. What do you guys think? Play it for the team, drop it in, put it up against your images. Let's get it perfect. And there was no, they weren't like upset or anything. It was like, there's still plenty of time. It went on, I mean, it went on about as long as it needed to. You know, we probably could have tinkered with it a little more than that, but by the end of like the 4th or 5th version, but we were just tweaking because we had the time, because everyone was like really excited about it. I mean, the cool thing was everyone was excited about the first version. And under a normal situation, we'd be like, okay, great, let's go, we got a theme. But it was like, we're not in a hurry. Let's see if that is really cool. What's that, you know? And it's like, all right, let me tinker with that. And it was funny because there was a component in the main theme that I wrote at the very last minute. I spent a week doing the first version, and there was like, oh, I'll just put this little thing in there, that's cool. And then everyone was like, dude, what's that? That is awesome. And I was like, yeah, it is. So I got rid of all the other stuff, and the thing that I dropped in, so you know what I mean? It was like, that became the main theme, that little thing that it was like almost an afterthought. But it's like the luxury of having that kind of time and having that kind of creative partnership where they're comfortable enough that they can like kind of throw ideas, but it was in a very positive way. And it's like, and the score ended up better. And I think now that I'm generating the material, the body of the score, I'm very confident in it. Just because I really like the main title and they really like the main title. Yes? Okay, cool. Couple more questions, I'll go through them fast. Yes?
So you're talking about how Mega Man 2 is like one of your favorite soundtracks. What are your favorite soundtracks from today, a modern game, like you were saying, how there's a lot more room and
Yeah. Okay.
and who would be like a favorite composer or somebody that you want to work with from games?
Well, you know, it's interesting because like I'm a fan of games. I don't know. It's funny. It's like if somebody's making music I really like, I wouldn't want to mess it up by collaborating with them. I really, really loved The Last of Us. Yeah. And you know what's odd is it's not necessarily music I would pump in my car, but playing the game and the way it was implemented was really inspiring. You know, the sparseness of it. I thought it was a really mature score, and I thought that I honestly thought that like game scores got so big in the late '90s, and they stayed big, and it's like I'm guilty of that too. You know, Dark Void was huge, and SOCOM 4 was huge. That I was like, wow, that's cool. You don't have to go big, and it made the characters feel more intimate and raw, and I definitely like that. That definitely stuck with me as something original. I would definitely kind of cite that as I think something really inspiring. There's a lot of other like really great stuff. Like I liked Shadow of Mordor. I thought was cool. Is that Gary Scheinman? Anyway, yeah, no, it's cool. You know, and with game stuff, like, you know, I don't know. It would be fun to collaborate with some of the guys that were doing stuff in the 8-bit and 16-bit era. The one guy I almost did actually in the project got canceled. But the guy named Spencer Nielsen who did Sonic CD. Yeah, dude, I met him up in San Francisco once, and he was like, "Oh, my name's Spencer Nielsen." I was like, "Oh my God!" And I was like, "I gotta call my brother Wade. I gotta tell him, like, dude." So like and he did Echo the Dolphin, and super cool dude. So we're pals, and like we've been looking for like the right project to do. So it'd be really fun. A couple other quick questions. I'm gonna answer them super fast. Yes.
So in Outlander, I loved your choice to do the 1940s music, even when she's back in the 1700s.
Cool.
And I was wondering what sort of gave you the idea to make that choice, and also how different is it making the coming up season now that they're in Paris?
Yes, good questions. I must give credit where it's due that the guy who thought to use All Along the Watchtower in Battlestar Galactica is the guy who thought to do that. He's Ron Moore, the showrunner of Outlander. He really wanted us to remember that she is a woman of the 40s. And so when she travels back in time to the 1740s, that was an idea that he had really firmly. And so I got to be involved in some of the discussions, and we, modernized some of her music. But to actually do that was like, I think it might have even been in the script. Like, he was really clear about that. The second season of Outlander takes place in Paris, and so I did a ton of homework on Parisian Baroque music. One of the reasons I do my job is that I get to learn new things. So after Battlestar Galactica, like, I learned so much about traditional Japanese drumming and world music. Like, I got an honorary doctorate in why people play what they play in Japanese music. But with this, it's like I knew nothing about Parisian Baroque music. And fortunately, the guy that plays viola da gamba for me on Outlander and Da Vinci, like, he's actually quite an expert on it. So he brought me in a bunch of tunes, we researched stuff, I learned all about how that music works. So it's gonna sound like a totally different experience. There's some elements of the Scottish, I mean, think about how crazy this is, right? Like, she's a woman, a British woman from 1940s who travels to Scotland in the 1740s, and then they go to Paris. It's just like, oh my God, there's so many different musical influences to her character. Like, she's so complicated, and obviously those aren't even the only places she goes. So some of it's like, I really did want to dive into Paris and make it sound unique, but also, it's like, she's still who she is. She's still her same, character. You're gonna like it. Any other questions? Yes.
How do you learn to let go of your projects? Because I know you're talking about like spending 5 days on a beat.
Yeah.
It's like, do you ever reach a point before the deadline where you're like, yeah, I'm done? Or do you tend to tweak?
Sometimes I have to talk out loud to myself. I honestly, dude, I swear one of the secrets of my success and my productivity is that I can do that. Because I know myself, I can work on something forever. And once I get to a level of minutia, that it's like, the gains aren't worth it. Like, yes, the cue's getting better, undeniable. But is it worth not getting another cue done today? And sometimes I have to say to myself, I say, call it, like, pencils down, you have to stop. And it's like, print this thing, send it out, and you can fine tune it in the live stages of the orchestration. Like, I'm gonna come back to this. But I have to, like, tell myself, you're good, and yeah, it's something I work on with myself. So, yes?
So there's an episode of Portlandia where the character gets addicted to Battlestar.
Yes, I love that episode.
And you never really see any of the footage of the show. You just hear it throughout the montage, just all the soundtrack. And did you know that was happening? What it was like to hear on a just completely different genre show? It's so iconic. It
was really cool, and I really did love how in Battlestar it felt like we all felt like we were working on something really special. When it started showing up there, when we won the Peabody Award, it just felt like we were onto something special, and that was a really good feeling, So, thanks everybody. I've got a signing coming up.